Star Trek The Next Generation was 7 seasons jam-packed full of episodes, 178 in total. But what were the episodes that didn't make it past the drawing board? Well, today we find out. Hello and welcome to Backtrek, a Star Trek web series that focuses on the background information of any given topic in Star Trek. In this episode, we're taking a look at some of the abandoned episode ideas for Star Trek The Next Generation, to better understand their place in Star Trek history. A few weeks ago, I took a deep dive into the unproduced scripts and story ideas for Star Trek The Original Series, and what I found fascinated me. There were a variety of storylines that were so close to being produced, yet for whatever the reason, never saw the light of day. Being a successful video, it began to get me thinking, what about the unproduced episodes for the various other Star Trek series? And so here we are. With the declaration that a new Star Trek series would be coming onto the small screen near you, Gene Roddenberry wanted to avoid as many of the problems as possible that he had faced during the making of the original series. One of those problems happened to be the struggle to actually have producible scripts and script ideas. So what he decided very early on, which was a practically unheard of thing, was to open the floor to anyone to submit a possible script and/or idea. That meant that you or I or any person in the world could submit an idea for consideration. And if chosen, the idea or script would then be bought and developed by those working for the show. Though you'd think this would be an excellent idea, the truth was that once put out there, Gene would turn down virtually every idea. Producer Robert Lewin recalls the problem with Roddenberry. There were a great many of writers pitching to write for the show. Several had story ideas with potential. But Gene was shooting down almost everything because it didn't fit his concept of what the 24th century should be. At least that's what he was saying. So here I am meeting with the writers, taking pitches, and I'm told the pitches are good to go to outline. Then later Roddenberry calls me into his office and says, "We're not buying those stories." I ask, why? He says because the credits that they have are junk. I say, Gene, what are you talking about? Their credits aren't junk. They are proven writers. What could I do? I was forced to go back on our word and turn down these scripts. Well, I was still getting calls from agents, so I told them, I think we've got an edict from the studios that we're not taking on any new writers anymore. Once again, I got called into Gene's office. Don't you dare tell the agents that. There's no edict, it's my decision. So first, he tells me that the studio says we can't buy those scripts because the writers have junk credits. In that first meeting, I said to him, what should I tell the agents? He said, lay it off on the studio. So I lay it off on the studio. He calls me back into his office and then says, how dare you lay it off on the studio? It makes me look like I'm not in control of my own show. Gene, I say, that's what you told me to do. He snaps back, I said no such thing. Thoroughly ticked now, I say, all right, Gene, you're the boss. Do you want my resignation? Gene stares me down and finally says, no, I don't want your resignation. You're doing a fine job, and dismiss me from his office. After all the extensive research I've done on Roddenberry, this type of flip-flopping doesn't surprise me at all. It's one of those classic Roddenberry paradoxes. A battle between who he wants to be versus who he actually is. And it was all because of his ego. I also think that Gene's declining health may have played a part in this problem, as by season 2, he would begin to scrap story ideas that even himself had written with no apparent reason given. Nevertheless, many ideas would be bought for the series and ultimately shelved. And here are some of those missing gems. Not to be confused with TNG's series finale, this episode All Good Things was very different. Written by Ronald D. Moore and Brannon Braga, this two-parter for Season 6 would see Starfleet recalling the Enterprise back to Earth and was planning to split up the crew, reassigning the officers to various different posts. The Enterprise was to become basically a luxury liner for Starfleet, as Starfleet was shifting its starship design focus after the Battle of Wolf 359. However, on the trip back to Earth, there would be a battle with an alien ship, forcing Captain Picard to separate the saucer section from the star drive section, which in turn would explode, and the saucer would crash onto an alien planet. Sound familiar? Braga claimed there was a desire among the writing staff to destroy the Enterprise D, and give the crew a new ship, and the show a new style in turn. The story, however, was rejected because, in Moore's words, the producers hated the idea, knowing the studio had plans to make a TNG movie once the series was complete, and wanted that movie to contain very familiar elements of the starship to be involved. Put simply, to the studio, it was too late in the game to change everything up. So the idea was shelved, and ultimately events from that story would end up included in the Next Generation series finale, as well as its feature film, Star Trek Generations. By 1994, development had begun on Star Trek Voyager. Voyager's creative team of executive producers Rick Berman, Michael Piller, and Jerry Taylor considered writing an episode for TNG's 7th season, which would have featured the character of Reginald Barclay, completing the creation of Voyager's holographic doctor. The idea was to establish a clear connection between the two shows. Barclay would have been working on this program in his spare time, and he finally decides to take leave from the Enterprise to put the finishing touches on it and present it to Starfleet Command. Ultimately, this connection would be abandoned, not because it wasn't a good idea, but because the powers that be didn't want TNG's last season to be all about setting up Voyager. As they saw it, the idea of establishing the Maquis was already large enough to allow fans to connect with the new show once it debuted. Big Bang Alien was a story idea pitched to the show by none other than Ronald D. Moore. It was a story about an alien that lived in the fabric of space and had been born around the same time as the Big Bang. In the episode, it would have been revealed that in the early times of the universe, these life forms were numerous and had flourished, but because they lived in the fabric of space itself, as the universe expanded, they would have become separated, with no means to communicate with each other. As such, this alien had been alone for literally billions of years, and so reached out to the Enterprise to alleviate its loneliness. It would try to communicate with the crew via intense hallucinations taken from their own mind, in an effort to keep the Enterprise in the area. Eventually, Troy would find a way to communicate with the alien, and the Enterprise crew would agree to inform Starfleet to build a science station in the star system, to study the alien and communicate with it. Though very proud of the storyline he had come up with, the idea would be shelved with no reason given as to why. Blood and Fire was a controversial episode written by David Gerrold, Gerrold being best known for his TOS episode The Trouble with Tribbles. The episode involved gay characters and an allegory to the AIDS crisis, and the rejection of this episode partly led to Gerrold leaving the Next Generation. Gerrold says, "My cause at the time was blood donorship, and I knew that people were terrified of AIDS, and so they had stopped donating blood, but I wanted Blood and Fire to be about the fear of AIDS, not the disease itself, but the fear surrounding it. One of the plot points of the episode involved having the crew donate their blood in order to save the lives of the away team. I thought, if we do this episode right, where blood donorship is a part of solving the problem, we can put a card at the end telling viewers that they could donate blood to save lives too. I thought it was something Star Trek should be doing, raising social awareness on an issue, and if we did it right, we could probably generate 1 million new blood donors at a time when there was a critical shortage. There were 2 characters that weren't very important to the story, background characters. At one point, Riker says to one of them, "How long have you two guys been together?" And one of the guys replies, "Since the academy, sir." That was it. That's all you need to know about their relationship. If you were a kid, you'd think, hey, they're just good buddies. If you were an adult, though, you'd get it. But when I submitted the script, suddenly everything hit the fan. One memo said, "We're going to be on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in some places, and we're going to get a lot of angry letters from mommies." My response was, if we get people writing letters, it shows they're involved in the show, and that's exactly what we want. We want them engaged, and a little controversy will be great for us. But the episode got shelved anyways, and that's when I knew I wasn't going to be allowed to write the best stories for the show that we should be writing. So I let my contract expire and I went off to do other things. Gerald would later adapt the script for the fan series Star Trek Phase 2. Seeing the potential in Gerald's Blood and Fire script, but understanding the concerns of the powers that be, Herb Wright would take Gerald's story idea and revamp it to remove the offensive materials, renaming the episode Blood and Ice. Herb would remove the gay characters and the AIDS allegory, replacing them with zombie crew members, basically creating Night of the Living Dead in space, or zombies in space if you will. The staff loved it, Rick loved it, but Michael Pillard didn't. He says, "Nice script, but it's really a first season type of show." And with that comment, the final nail was put into the coffin for this episode. There were many other stories submitted for Star Trek The Next Generation, and in future installments of Backtrack, we'll take a look at some of them. Ultimately, it's truly disheartening to see the missed opportunities of both All Good Things and Blood and Fire. Star Trek has always been a socially woke show. That's part of its charm. After all, you can't have infinite diversity in infinite combinations as a core value of the show, while at the same time being completely against showing diversity in all the infinite colors of the rainbow. An episode like Blood and Fire could have been a trailblazer episode even though it really didn't involve the gay characters, except to say, hey, we're here and it's normal in the 24th century. But sadly, sentiments of the time prevented that from happening. And had the Season 6 two-part cliffhanger happened, with the Enterprise D being destroyed, it could have truly breathed a breath of fresh air into Season 7. In fact, could have probably guaranteed the show had more seasons, having the same type of response that the Best of Both Worlds two-parter had. But Berman and the other show producers began to get stuck in their Star Trek box, not really willing to take many chances anymore with a show that in their eyes was still successful. Little did they know that this inflexibility, this inability to create different shows which stepped outside the box, would lead directly to the downfall of the franchise, at least for a while. Thank you for watching today's episode of Backtrack. What do you think of these abandoned story ideas? Which ones would you have loved to see on screen? Would you like me to create more of these videos about these lost tales? Well, leave your comment in the section below, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, hitting that little bell icon so you won't miss a single video we release. Want to help the channel continue to bring these little gems to life? Then consider becoming a channel patron. The link to our Patreon account is in the description below. Thanks again for watching. Live long and prosper.